Hey, what's happening, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of The Strange Road. I'm Mikey. This is Bub. Bub, what's happening?
What's up?
Doing good?
Chilling. Yeah, it's nice and sunny today, finally.
Oh, it's nice. We got Stoner in master control. Thank you so much, dude, for making everything look and sound great. As always, we have an awesome guest here tonight, 40-year researcher and president of Round Town UFO Society, Cameron Jones. Cameron, what's happening? How are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. It's it's exciting to be here. This is kind of a really interesting setup. I like it. It's really cool in here.
Appreciate it. That's what we were going for sure. So, man, we met you last year at Frogman Festival. Kind of everything was a little bit hectic and chaotic, but you were one of the speakers. You did a great job. And you're the director and kind of founder of Round Town UFO, Pete Hardinger. I met and never have met in person, but we've talked on the phone several times. And Jeffrey Wilson connected me with him, and then Pete connected me with you. And so here we are.
Yeah, Frogman was just a lot. Yeah, that was a busy day. I was there. I think I was there at the main day, Saturday. I think I was a speaker Saturday.
Yeah.
And it was like a whirlwind because was it the second annual? Well, last year was the second one, right?
Yeah.
So, and just for just for it only being the second year, there was so many people, and but it was good. We had a nice crowd. Like the speakers, I was really impressed with the crowd because of the coronavirus and stuff. I had stopped giving talks for like a year or two, and then when they started back up at like libraries and stuff like that, I would be happy with like 5-10 people,
Wow.
And like it was just, I was like, I don't know if we'll ever see those pre-COVID numbers again for talks. But then nowadays things have gotten better, and more people kind of show up for those. I'm finally getting invited back to libraries to talk, mostly libraries. But it was great to be at the Frogman because, gosh, there must have been, I don't know, 50 or 100 people in the room. So that was made me kind of nervous because I hadn't spoken in front of that many people in a long time. But it was nice. I was like, wow. I was like, this is cool. I was like, I like the energy. I like this room. It's a big room full of people. So it was fun.
People eat up that information. They just love it. Cryptids, I think I'm surprised YouTube and all these podcast categories that you can choose your genre. There's no paranormal. Like you can be entertainment, you can be, basically like a informational channel, educational channel. There's no paranormal or cryptid channel yet.
Yeah, there really should be because I think that's the reason why, History Channel kind of went to so much paranormal kind of content.
Yeah.
Because that's what's popular. That's what so many people want to hear about and watch. And that's why these conventions are so popular. That's why podcasts like this, are popular because that's what people really, a lot of people are interested in that. So, yeah, there really should be a category like that out there for
Absolutely.
it. Yeah.
Do you think it's kicked up, though? I mean, the overall level of interest, because it feels like, and maybe it's from the History Channel and shows like that, kind of like hitting on it more and spreading it more widely, and even having, say, researchers, scientists, Dr. Meldrum would say with Bigfoot or whoever it is, come in and give, even if they don't have an answer, they have some possible like way of explaining some things to give it a little bit more footing, right? Because it seems a lot more easily talked about now than it used to be 10 years ago. If you talk about Sasquatch or the Mothman, people will be like, where's your straitjacket?
Yeah.
Where did you escape from? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now it's much more like you can talk. I can go into the coffee shop and start talking about Bigfoot or Sasquatch or aliens. And people will be like, oh, yeah. It's weird because it's on that level. It's really gotten a little bit more ubiquitous to where, again, it's not like, hey, Justin's gone crazy again talking about Bigfoot. Like, people engage with you about it. I don't know. It's more aware.
Oh, yeah, I definitely think so. The Round Town UFO Society, you'd mentioned in the introduction, I'm the president of Round Town UFO Society, and our director, founder, Pete Hardinger, he talks about that a lot, and that he talks about how the giggle factor is kind of like gone or definitely lessened, and that people are much more open to talking about this topic. Well, paranormal in general, but UFOs, much more willing to talk about UFOs. It's not so much of just like a funny topic anymore. Like, you know, like you get occasionally on the mainstream news, you get a UFO story, but it was always like kind of what they call a kicker, where it kind of be something to kind of laugh about at the end of a broadcast. And nowadays, you know, that, I mean, we got congressional hearings about UFOs and stuff. So definitely, I think it has increased. It's increased in the general interest in these things, and the like kind of respectability and that they're getting, you know, definitely from people like in the, like you were saying, like in the field of Bigfoot, cryptids, people like you mentioned Jeff Meldrum. When somebody like a, you know, very renowned scientist like Jeff Meldrum, you see him on TV and him at these events talking about it, it kind of gives it a gives the topic kind of like a more of an air of respectability, and people I think it does help bring it to the bring it out more.
And it's funny that you say that, because one thing we always reference was the only thing we had was Unsolved Mysteries, and you're wearing the t-shirt, or you know, Beyond Belief, or one of those shows,
In Search of,
In Search of. You know,
I never watched it. I just know the references of it. Right. It wasn't a show, but still knowing, again, like 40 in Style, or even John Keel, and people were, they've been doing this, but again, it was like on a low simmer
type of thing. It was like
it's now turned up to a boiling level where it's like that pot is bubbling.
And I mean, talk about Pete's seen the whole gamut. He's been at this for how long? Since he was 18.
So Pete's in his 80s now. So you do the math.
Shout out to Pete Hardinger, by the way. What a wonderful man.
Pete. Pete's great. Pete's still with us. He's not able to attend every meeting now because of health reasons. So that's when he kind of had me sort of take over the meetings. But Pete was obviously still involved with RUFOS. He was at our Skywatch we had a few months back. Pete was able to meet the Skywatch, and so that was a lot of fun. But yeah, Pete's seen it all. I mean, he goes back to, he can remember, you know, post-Roswell, you know, so
Dang.
I mean, we just look at the 80s. I mean, we were ridiculed and probably made fun of, and like that giggle. Now you have people that we grew up, you would never expect to them to approach you about a question about a conspiracy, about something paranormal. It's just like, whoa. It's really odd.
It's different, but it's nice.
I think it was just the ability to indoctrinate the society to view it as laughable, right? Because be like you said, the kicker story, where they would always be the connotation of like, oh, did you see the little green man? Like, I was in a car with friends years ago and I saw something strange and I couldn't explain it. They're like, oh, it was a UFO. I'm like, yeah, because I can't tell you what it was. It wasn't a helicopter. It wasn't a plane. You're driving the car with me. What do you think it was? Like, and then when I asked them what it was themselves, they didn't really have an answer. So it's like, I think it's a way to set up those walls to get people to reject. And we've talked about it on our show quite a few times. And I just heard it mentioned in, I don't know how many podcasts here lately. I start to feel like I'm being like watched and somehow being, you know, disseminated elsewhere. But the whole UFO to UAP, right?
Yeah.
Because if you say UFO, it still has what? The connotation of little green men.
Yeah.
It's weird. But you say UAP, what is that? Now it sounds governmental. It sounds official. It's got the stamp of, it's weird how that rebranding's going on. And it's almost like they're trying to get us to accept that, hey, we've gone from it's laughable to now it's, here's the new terminology. And it's, again, is it 1984 where they keep reinventing words and they keep, you know, moving the needle and reshaping things. But especially even in the ufology vein right now, it feels very primed that there's going to be bigger announcements, right? Like you said, the congressional hearings were huge. And I just listened to a story the other day, I think I was telling him about on another podcast I listened to. And it was a gentleman who was, you know, in his mid-20s working at a nuclear missile facility in the 70s. and him and his partner that were, working the site together, because he's like, you always have a partner. He's like, these guys went out, had a UFO encounter, ended up miles away from where they should have been, behind a dam. And like, this guy was like, I couldn't tell them what I saw entirely. So he omitted certain parts of the story, told them most of the story. And the parts he left out, he's like, there's no way I could ever talk about, because he saw actual beings. He saw aliens. And then they start talking about, well, how many people do you think have seen things like that? And so there's a whole powder keg of people for years that have been waiting to kind of, and I think that's what's happening now. Is it's kind of like the Bowser thing with the soldiers and veterans. The closer they get to passing away, they want to get their stories out.
Yeah.
So that era, right? If we're going back all the way to even Roswell and everything, that generation is now, those stories either going to get out or they're going to stay with them forever. And I think that's what have I got to lose at this stage? So you're going to see a lot of that kind of bubbling up. And I think that might be why the congressional hearings are like, kind of got to get this going now, because otherwise the cat is going to get so far out of the bag that we're going to look stupid.
They're trying to control it. So
I think they're trying to bubble up with it. I think Congress and the government and everything is kind of like, shit, we got to get real with this.
Yeah. I definitely think with, you saw that a lot with Roswell, in the 90s and, to the early mid 2000s, you saw a lot of those people that were involved with Roswell getting ready to pass away.
Yep.
And that's when we got a lot of really great testimony, evidence about what happened at Roswell. Is that these people that were involved were kept silent for so long, and then when they reach a certain age, or like deathbed confessions, there's some really great books out there on Roswell, like Thomas Carey and our friend. Oh, he's a friend of our organization. I forget his name. But they have some really great books. Witness to Roswell's one, Children of Roswell. All those books have a lot of the really, I think, really compelling evidence. Witness evidence from Roswell has come from the last 25 years when people reach a certain age where they start telling their stories. So
I'm saying they get to a point where at the time, if you're in your 20s, again, like this guy at the nuclear facility or whatever, and you're thinking, I've got a family, I've got a wife, I've got to put food on the table, I can't go tell them about these aliens that I saw or the abduction. Like, he left all this stuff out. And again, he's like, there's numerous other people that have probably had these experiences, but now that they get to an age where it's like, hey, my kids are grown, my whatever, everything's taken care of, and I have this story. And it's like you said, even the Roswell stuff, that's interesting you say that, because you're right. There has been more and more kind of released about that in the last decade and a half, or so, because of that fact. But yeah, it makes me think of our friend Jim Bowser and how he would say that he had a lot of rapport with servicemen, and again, from World War II and other encounters, after a while they would just know about him, and they'd be like, hey, you're the guy that kind of like will give my story a place to live. And that's what happens. Like, I don't know. If you had, because I don't have anything that incredible in my life, right? Especially not, I don't have an NDA or something against, or, I can't talk about, but it would be, I don't know, unless you're the type of person that it just doesn't matter to you. But I would think if you had that incredible of an encounter or experience, most people would be driven to want to share that.
Yeah. And
so it's got to, just like a volcano, by a certain point, it just erupts.
Yeah. And then I think you touched on kind of an interesting subject. Some people are willing to say a little bit about what they saw, but then sometimes I know with myself and my research over the years, you'll see people are willing to say a little bit about an experience, but they sometimes they tend to want to leave out some of the more fantastic elements because they're worried about like credibility.
100%.
Like somebody could tell us a story about their encounter with a UFO and say they're talking to a group of investigators or something, and then the minute they were to mention a landing or especially beings,
Yeah.
I mean, you're gonna lose over half of those investigators. They're just gonna dismiss the case as too fantastical.
Right.
But I sometimes I think those landing cases, those entity cases, while they can seem, just amazing, I think some of those are the really interesting cases.
Yeah. Are you
Because
talking about like Chris Bledsoe type stuff where it was an orb that turns into a bull that turns into this like lady that basically is like lady from Fatima?
Fatima.
He's got a really wild story if you haven't listened to his.
No,
but
I don't think so.
This
but
is
I know
what you're saying though is like it goes from like, okay, we can follow to where like it's a UFO or it's an orb or something, but the moment it turns into making contact or turning into an entity or having a dialogue, let's say, or even an interaction of information somehow.
Yeah, you tend to lose a lot of people, and witnesses are scared of that. I think kind of what we mentioned earlier, I think some of that stigma and unbelievability has gone away a little, but you still definitely have witnesses who will leave out, some of the more fantastic elements of their encounters because they're scared about even not being believed.
Yeah.
But yeah, myself, I'm interested in some of those. I'm very interested in some of those more fantastical accounts, especially if the witness seems to give credibility. Because, like I say, as far as UFOs, in my opinion, somebody's flying these things. Like,
you think so?
If that's what they are, it's like I was telling my friend John Fry, he's a member of our organization. I was like, it seems like so many people, investigators and just normal everyday people, they're with you when you talk about a UFO in the sky. But if you talk about what might be inside that UFO, or like I said, that UFO landing, then it's like, it's just too unbelievable. But why would that be so unbelievable? I mean, something's behind these things.
What's your favorite case of these landing cases that maybe other people haven't taken seriously?
Let's see. There was some really interesting stuff, like going back even to the 1890s. The great the airship wave. People were seeing mystery ships in the sky before the Wright brothers were flying planes. One that sticks to mind that's always fascinated me was the Aurora, Texas case. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
I've heard something about this, but
yeah, it was. It was, and this is the late 1890s, Aurora, small town of Aurora, Texas. Multiple witnesses in town saw something flying through the air, appeared to be in trouble, smoking fire, trailing, crashed into the judge's windmill.
Yeah.
Remember that was reported, and then it fell and crashed. And people of the town went down there and found wreckage, strange wreckage. They didn't know what it was, and they found occupants, at least one occupant. And they said that although this person, whatever you want to call it, was injured, enough of the body was left to where it was agreed upon at the town that this was not an inhabitant of this world, and they gave it a burial. They buried it in the local cemetery, the Aurora Cemetery. Now, the actual gravesite has been lost because the actual stone that was there for decades and decades was stolen. But this pilot was buried in the Aurora Cemetery. Witnesses saw the body, and it was reported on in the local newspaper as just that, a crash. Something came down. The pilot was killed. The pilot was not from this planet. It was given a Christian burial, and it was reported on. And, some people try to say these cases, some people try to say the Aurora case was fake. It was a fake newspaper account from the 1890s, but it's interesting. I find the case so interesting, at least, because in the 1970s, UFO researcher Jim Mars, he's from Texas. Jim passed away a few years ago, but he was from Texas, and we're getting to these 1970s. He's like, if we're going to find these people, if anybody's still alive from that time, we got to do it now. Mm-hmm. So in the 1970s, Jim was able to find, I think it was 3 or 4 witnesses who were children at the time. And we have their testimony. It's in they talk about it in, I think, 2 of Jim's books. They remember it. They remember the crash. They remember their parents going to look at the crash. They remember their parents talking about the body. 2 of the witnesses remember the body being buried in a local cemetery. So that shows to me and a lot of researchers that this was a real event.
Yeah.
So that one's always fascinated me. Sorry, I'm going on and on about
No, it's fascinating.
Aurora, Texas is one of those landing
Yeah.
crash cases.
Couldn't you go out there and use some ground penetrating radar and maybe
They did that on UFO Hunters.
find it?
Yeah.
They went to that.
Find
they
the
did
body?
an episode.
UFO Hunters did hit. Was that History Channel? History
Yeah.
Channel's done some stuff over the years on
Yeah.
Aurora.
Yeah. They had your boy. What's the guy with the glasses
No
from
idea.
UFO Hunters? The older gentleman, MUFON guy.
No idea.
You know him. The main guy from that show, the host of the show, basically.
But yeah, there has been a couple shows that have done some stuff in there. The former site of the judge's property, they because it was said at the time that crash metal was thrown into a local well, and I know one of the shows went down into the well. Was able to find some kind of strange metals that were tested and were seen to be unknown alloys, stuff like that.
Why would you?
Okay.
Yeah.
Bill something.
Yeah. Why would you throw the metals away though if something like that crashed? You know what I mean? Like you
Yeah,
would think
something
that'd be
was-
kind of like a museum piece or something.
I think this gentleman was trying to clean up his yard.
Oh,
Part
wow.
of the crash had come down in his yard, and he's, if I remember correctly, he was trying to clean up this crash. Part of the crash had come in his yard, and he just decided to throw the metal down this old well that nobody used anymore. At least that's what we come to think now. That's what the story is now. But yeah, that's a really interesting case to me. I like that's one I've always found interesting. Roswell, of course, we talked about Roswell. A lot of researchers in ufology are like, oh, I'm so tired of hearing about Roswell. I'm so sick about Roswell, But I still think there's stuff to be learned from Roswell. I still think Roswell is important. Roswell is fascinating. I mean, I think there's a reason why the term Roswell is kind of like a household word.
Yeah.
Because there is so much evidence in Roswell. And Ohio has a really interesting connection with Roswell, and that's Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Yep.
And that it was always reported from the very beginning that the crash debris and possibly maybe even bodies were, their final destination was here in Ohio at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Then I think it was called Wright Field.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's investigators who still believe that the Roswell crash and bodies are still there, underground. And there's a really great book called Inside the Real Area 51, which is all about Wright-Patterson and its UFO history. So, we in Ohio have that connection there to Roswell. Yeah.
Wasn't there some weather balloon crash or something outside of Circleville where that's where they got kind of the cover story, and they used the cover story for an actual event that happened in Ohio?
Yeah.
With a weather balloon. Do you know that story? Because
yeah.
Pete told me that story. I don't know if that's in Pete's book that he was released. Because there's some other
sure it is.
connection to Roswell that's interesting
Pete
too.
calls it the Circleville Roswell connection.
Yeah.
And that the famous weather balloon, that was originally the government came out and said that they had captured a flying saucer, a crash saucer at Roswell. And then the next day there was what we call the cover up started. And it was it actually wasn't a UFO. It was just a down weather balloon.
Yep.
And these weather balloons would crash all the time. They would just fall out of the sky sometimes, and farmers would find them. And there was a farmer from Circleville who found one of these crashed weather balloons in his yard, and it made kind of like the local news. And just there's a famous picture of the gentleman holding the weather balloon.
Philip Corso.
Yeah. Corso from Roswell.
Yeah.
So it's thought and believed that this is where the government got their balloon cover-up story.
Yeah.
Is that in Circleville, this crash report, somebody got a hold of this story from Circleville about this farmer who who had this crashed weather balloon on his farm, and a lot of people, it's I think it's in one of those books I mentioned earlier. They mentioned that, but it's believed to be that's where the Roswell, the military got their explanation, or the weather balloon was from Circleville, where our UFO group is.
I mean, it makes sense from right field being there, being like, hey, intel gathering, and hey, we need a cover story, and hey, somebody in Roswell let it slip that a UFO is out there. Get the real story out, you know.
And it was
just
so
intel
soon.
gathering.
Yeah, it was very shortly before Roswell. The story was fresh out there, a weather balloon crash story.
Yeah,
and Corso and others took that and made that the official story for Roswell. And I mean, there's been some variations as far as the cover story goes. And you talk about the mogul balloon, but in the end, really, that's still the official explanation for Roswell as a weather balloon. But
Complete garbage.
yeah, yeah, I agree.
What are some cases in Ohio? I'm sure you probably, we can stick on this subject of UFOs for a little bit, because I know you do a ton of other paranormal investigations and different things. But a case in Ohio that there's a couple really famous cases in Ohio. Have you looked into any of those specifically, landing cases or?
Ohio's definitely high up there in reported UFO sightings. There's a lot of UFO sightings reported in Ohio. Going back to Circleville area where we're from, or the Round Town UFO Society. Other than the weather balloon crash we talked about, there was also the Bruce Stephenson encounter. Now, if you've talked to Pete, he might have mentioned the Bruce Stephenson encounter, because Pete always talks about Bruce Stephenson, especially when he's talking to somebody from like a podcast, or we were interviewed by the Columbus Dispatch, and Pete talked a lot about that. But it is a really interesting case, and I know why Pete's excited about it. Circleville's such a small town, but we do have some interesting UFO cases. The Bruce Stephenson encounter was it was 1948. A farmer right outside Circleville, Route 56, which is right outside of town. Where this happened is probably less than 1 mile from my house. Again, 1948, Bruce Stephenson, a farmer, was going out. It was like 2 or 3 a.m., going out to check on, I believe it was his cows. He opened the back door of his farmhouse, and there he saw a huge UFO hovering over his backyard. Very low. He said it was like even to the top of the barn, like as far as how high off the ground it was. And I think it had flashing lights, amber lights on it, but it was a big deal at the time. It was reported in the Columbus Dispatch. And we have actually had, that farm is still there. It's owned by the Barthelmess family in town. Pete has, he's really good friends with the Barthelmess family. And so we have had a lot of our sky watches out there at that farm, at the Stephenson farm, because it's still there. It's just owned by, different family now. And we had our sky watches there once a year for a long time. When the Columbus Dispatch reporter came down to interview myself, Pete, and John Fry from the organization, she interviewed us out there at the Bruce Stephenson encounter site. So that's one we talk about a lot from Circleville. Another one. But Ohio has, Circleville is right off Route 23, just like so Columbus, kind of Route 23 goes through Columbus, becomes High Street, and you go south, and then 30 minutes south, and there's Circleville. We've definitely noticed, and what I call the UFO corridor is from Columbus to Chillicothe. So you got Columbus, Circleville, Chillicothe. That section of Route 23 is like a UFO hotspot. Yeah. And you think, well, there's a lot of reported there because there's a lot of traffic there, but that is true. But even considering the amount of traffic, I believe the area itself is a hotspot.
A lot of mounds.
Yeah.
Earthworks. Yeah. And all that stuff.
And could there be a connection there? Because Ohio is unique in its mounds. There's more mounds in Ohio than anywhere else, I think. Could there be a connection there with the amount of UFOs? We get reports all the time. If I hear from John, a member of our organization, somebody saw a UFO outside of town, I was like, I bet you it's off Route 23. Yeah. And they're like, yeah. And
Scioto River, that whole,
Ohio has a lot of great cases. A lot of stuff is still seen in Ohio. We have UFO sightings all the time. We had a case. We had a case about a month ago. Reported to our organization. A woman outside of town saw something very strange in the sky. Something with bright lights. I wasn't the investigator on the case, but I did try to keep up on it. And our secretary, Chris Franz, who also does a little bit of investigating, she determined through a lot of great research, I got to tell you, she really spent a lot of time on this case trying to get a good answer for this witness. She determined through using things like flight radar. I think she even talked to somebody at Rickenbacker. I may be wrong about that, but she determined that it was actually a refueling exercise.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it was.
So that's why it looks so strange, and probably the pattern that was going on to just stay in a circle or something. I'm sure they do.
It was strange. It was at night.
It would have looked really odd. Yeah.
Yeah. So she was able to determine that, and that was a lot. That was some great work. I mean, she had her present the evidence at our last meeting, and she was absolutely right. That one was definitely explainable, but a lot of them aren't explainable.
I wanted to ask you, you said earlier the whole thought about, so there's a UFO or an unexplained whatever. Most people can go that far. Oh yeah. And then once you try to break through that and go, what's inside it? Or what, is there something inside? Is there aliens inside, or is it I don't know if you've seen the film called Nope, where like the UFO is basically an entity as well, right? It's
oh my gosh,
living.
That movie was fascinating.
Yeah. So
Sky
then we
creatures.
start really like having a very wide expanse of like, could they be vehicles with biological beings in them? Could they be vehicles that are biological themselves? Are they plasma balls? Are they these orbs? Can you speak on that at all? Do you have any kind of thoughts, or from your stories you've come across or cases, have you had anything like that where somebody's like, no, it wasn't a UFO like a saucer, it was a plasma orb or this or that, or something kind of, again, not a physical craft that maybe there's passengers on? Because again, we're trying to anthropomorphize ourselves into it as far as what would we as humans do, and it's like, there's a whole wide range of possibilities that we can't consider because we don't know. We haven't had the experience yet. Obviously, we're experiencing something very otherworldly or out of our ability to understand when we see these things, because it's not commonplace knowledge.
Yeah, a lot of people are into UFOs, researchers, or people who like members of our group, members of MUFON. If you're into UFOs, most people tend to have like a pet theory, right, about what UFOs are.
Yeah.
I am of the opinion myself that what we are seeing is a multitude of phenomenon. We're seeing a lot of different things. It's not just one or the other. But yeah, I definitely think that I think some, at least in the past, possibly still, were piloted vehicles. But I also think, I know Pete, our founder, is of the opinion that these are time travelers.
Okay.
Pete's main theory is that these are time travelers from the future, but I guess then we're still talking about piloted craft. But oh yeah, there's definitely UFOs. Like the movie Nope was fascinating because of all the thinking I've done on UFOs, I've never thought about that possibility.
No, same.
It was actual, like, these things were beings in themselves in the sky, living in the sky.
Kind of like a sky stingray or something, like or a flat-bodied shark, because
it could change its appearance, right? Like it would appear like a regular saucer, but then in other parts of the movie it would appear differently.
More animalistic. Yeah. Well, when we had another guest on and he was talking about there being like, bacteria and organisms in the upper atmosphere, and started kind of thinking about it like you have the ocean, which is water, and then you have the air, which is water.
He talked about this.
So it's more like there's levels of water going on. We're in a thinner layer of water, kind of, if you think about it. We're swimming through oxygen and all this. But up in the upper atmosphere, there are actual like creatures. There are living things that are up.
Squid-like creatures.
Yeah.
And invertebrates.
So that's why Nope really got me thinking. I was like, wow, somebody
knew something.
plopped those together.
Maybe. Yeah, that's very possible. And these orbs, you mentioned these orbs too. Orbs are reported all the time as far as like UFO reports go. There's a couple hotspots talking about Ohio and orbs. Lake Erie. Lake Erie is a orb hotspot.
Oh, cool.
The orange orbs are famously reported and still seen over Lake Erie. And then going the other side of Ohio down south, I mean, there's been a lot of orbs seen on off the Ohio River. I believe we maybe 10, 20 years ago, our organization was doing some research. I'm not sure about the time. Might not have been that long ago. I think it was called the green orbs of the Ohio River. A bunch of people were seeing green orbs in the area off the Ohio River down there. So yeah, orbs are fascinating. And when you think about orbs, you also think about people will report ghosts. When you think about ghosts and spirits, a lot of orbs are reported like as possible spirit activity. So I've always found it interesting. You've got these two types of orbs, right? You've got orbs that people see in their homes that maybe it's evidence
and with
of
Bigfoot
ghosts.
too.
Yeah,
Orbs in Bigfoot.
And then you got mystery orbs in the sky. Could those things be actually the same? You got two different types of orbs, but is it possible? And I think the Skinwalker Ranch, I think a lot of those orbs, if I remember in the original books, these orbs would go from the sky, being a traditional like unknown object orb, and then we'd go into a house and be smaller, and then it'd be kind of like a different orb,
Yeah. What's
so
going on
crazy.
there? God.
Yeah, there's some wild stuff happening.
And there's so beyond our understanding of, quantum physics and physics. We're just not there yet to understand, how do these things go into a mesa and come out of a mesa? How do they go into the ocean and these transmedium type craft?
Right.
They're creating some kind of temporal bubble that it doesn't splash when it hits the water. They come out and they just rise out of the water.
Yeah, like USOs, unidentified submerged objects, like the stuff comes out of the water. Yeah, that's been some of the stuff reported by the Navy, right? That's come out in the last few years. Was naval officers talking about these, I guess, UAPs coming in and out of the water, and like displaying those strange characteristics, like you were saying, like not creating splash, like appearing to go in and out of water, but not necessarily interacting with the water, kind of thing, maybe.
Yeah, how does that work?
Right.
Well, they're in the water. They have bases in the water, from what it sounds like.
Yeah,
I
think
that's possible.
I think most of them are from here.
Yeah, that is definitely one of the big
They've always been
theories
here.
out there, is that these aren't actually extraterrestrial, and that maybe they're part of this planet, part of our world. And I think that's also something you're seeing. I think, like I said, I think we're seeing a lot of different phenomena at once, and I definitely think that's part of it.
Yeah. What if the world again is kind of like the big crib for all of us, to infantile beings beyond, and the UFOs are like popping in and out of the water in the Great Lakes and going off, and they're shooting out into the cosmos and visiting other planets and stars, and then they come back. This is just that's where they park. You know what I mean? Maybe they don't really hang out here and interact with us as much, and every now and then they kind of like show themselves to us. But for the most part, they're just coming and going from here as a base.
It would be terrestrial as opposed to these things maybe being extraterrestrial. But yeah, I definitely think there's something to them being seen a lot, going in and out of the water. I think there could be some sort of underwater bases. I definitely think that's possible. And one of the other theories that I believe that we're seeing, as I believe we are seeing interdimensional craft, things coming in and out of our dimension, things that maybe could be from here, but just in a slightly different,
wavelength, or
frequency,
something like that. Yeah.
Dimension.
So I think that's something that we're probably seeing too.
Makes me kind of wonder, like, if that's true. Are there other like entities or beings, say, in this same space, but just on a different wavelength while we're doing this show right now?
Yeah.
Well, in Skinwalker Ranch, the show on the History Channel, they have these Navajo elders chant and sing and then this rock starts to become heated. They can see it on the thermal, and then all of a sudden, pew, pew, they start seeing all these orbs flying through, and they start hearing things like out in the distance rustling around, and it was just literally like a vibration that opened all of this. It was sound that they were using to basically, and they were by this area that looked like a petroglyph. It was almost like a stonework that was a spiral right in that, and they had the Navajo out there, and they were shocked. They're like, this is literally the marker of a portal right here.
Wow.
So they bring these elders in, and they start doing these chants, and all this activity starts happening.
That sounds like it was a good episode.
It was wild. Yeah.
I think places like Skinwalker Ranch are these areas of high strangeness. So we've got these areas where you've got multiple fantastic phenomenon reported. There's I think there's others, the Bridgewater Triangle,
Bradshaw Ranch.
Yeah, the Bradshaw Ranch. These areas where, possibly where the fabric between one dimension and another is thin, and that's why we're seeing so much unexplained phenomena in this one area. I think that's definitely possible. Point Pleasant could be another one, where the Mothman famously was seen. My friend Jeff Wamsley is the premier Mothman researcher in the world. Him and his daughter Ashley run the Mothman Festival. But the interesting thing about, I've talked with Ashley especially, thing about Mothman, and I talk about it when I actually have spoken at Mothman Festival, and I've given some presentations on Mothman. One of the things that's interesting is that area, the Ohio River Valley near Point Pleasant, West Virginia, it wasn't just Mothman that was seen. It was there was a lot of other stuff going on, especially in the 60s.
Happening. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was when the Mothman appeared. That whole area was in the middle of a UFO wave.
Yep. Indrid Cold.
Yeah, and then you start getting
Woodrow Derenberger.
Exactly.
A lot of Men in Black.
The Men in Black stuff is wild, because that reporter witnessed it in like a coffee shop or checking into a hotel.
Mary Hire, the reporter down there
from Athens.
Yep. Yeah, the Athens reporter.
Her report of the Men in Black was
her encounters
creepy.
With the Men in Black down there were strange.
Yeah.
And gosh, even today, Point Pleasant, especially if you visit when it's not the festival,
got an interesting.
It has a
vibe.
It has a weird energy. I mean, it really does.
Cornstalk Memorial with the giant obelisk that's right on the water.
Yeah, right on the riverfront there.
This is a weird vibe. You walk around that park, and it's just real strange.
It is. It is. It has a really, especially when it's not the festival and you're down there, it has a very weird.
Yeah.
I think there is something strange down there. I think you've got another kind of area of multiple activities. And you familiar with the Lowe Hotel down there in Point Pleasant? It's like right there in the middle of town.
You can't book that thing. It's like booked 2 years out.
Yeah, I was able to stay there. It wasn't during the festival, obviously. I was able to stay there for a night a few years back. And the Lowe Hotel was reportedly haunted.
Yeah.
And I stayed there in what was supposedly the most haunted room they gave me, and it was crazy, the activity I experienced there.
Really?
Yes. Like I wasn't like I wasn't expecting anything, so I was like shocked when I was experiencing stuff. I almost left in the middle of the night because I was so scared.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I remember I was staying there, I was doing some research in Point Pleasant on the Mothman, and I was seeing some friends down there. So like, I'm going to stay in the Lowe Hotel, and I went in and I asked for a room. This was several years ago. This might have been 10 years ago. And I was like, what rooms do you have available? And she's like, well, are you here because of it being haunted? Or are you interested in the haunted aspects?
Do you want the haunted room or the non-haunted room? This is like smoking or non-smoking.
Yeah. She's like, are you here for one of the haunted rooms? And I was like, okay, sure. She's like, well, this is our most haunted.
Sure.
This is our most haunted
room.
one. And I do have an interest in hauntings and the paranormal. So I said, yeah, sure. And I stayed there, and everything was fine until I didn't really experience anything. I was just watching TV. I went and got something to eat, came back. And then when I laid down to go to bed late at night, it was like as soon as I laid down, I was hearing knocks, which was a little weird, but it was a hotel. There was probably a lot of other people there. I didn't think so much of that. But then what really, really scared me was there was absolutely the sound of footsteps walking around the bed that I was sitting in.
Ooh.
I was convinced every time I opened my eyes, like somebody's in the room, somebody's in the room.
You're staying alone as well. This is just you.
Yeah.
Bold.
And you're not usually like a paranoid person when you're traveling on your own. You're out, you're just.
Yeah, like I felt really comfortable there.
Yeah.
Like I felt comfortable there. I was familiar with the hotel. I never, stayed the night there. And the footsteps and the walking around the bed became so intense that I was like, I don't think I can stay in here.
Wow.
I was like, I think I'm going to have to go out and sleep the rest of the night in the car.
Wow.
And because it was just there was no doubt about what I was experiencing. Somebody was walking around the bed really close to me.
That's scary.
And I was expecting to be touched next. I was like, it's like something's going to touch me. And so then I hung on, and then the sun finally came up, and then I was able to check out.
Did you sleep at all?
I don't really think so. Maybe like an hour or two and like bits and pieces, but I didn't really sleep really.
See, I wonder if, but here's the thing too. It probably wouldn't do this because that's the point of staying in a haunted room, I guess. But I would say, if I'm wearing my headphones, that ghost would have been really disappointed because I wouldn't have heard the footsteps at all.
Right.
So then you wonder, are they going to kick it up a notch?
Right.
Then you're going to get poked like, hey,
Touched.
look here. I mean...
But yeah, I think Point Pleasant is another one of those areas where you don't just have Mothman sightings, you don't just have UFOs being reported. You've got other stuff too.
The curse of Chief Cornstalk, and all those ancient legends that just so happen, and the river confluence.
I think it's the river.
Two major rivers.
I honestly think it's just the flow of water.
Giant obelisk.
Because the flow of water is energy, right? You can split the flow of water and make electricity out of it. I'm just saying
where those rivers meet right there, right?
Yeah,
wherever they're going.
Yeah, waterways meet there. I think.
It's like the Kanawha River and the Ohio River.
Yeah, the curse of Cornstalk. Some people say that Cornstalk, the famous Indian chief there, was killed. That he put a curse on the area of Point Pleasant. And that maybe that's why Point Pleasant has experienced so much strange stuff and tragedy. The Silver Bridge collapse, of course, killing so many in such a small town. The Mothman showed up. Whether the Mothman was malevolent or not, it did scare a lot of people who saw it. So some people think, well, could those kind of frightening experiences be part of the curse of Cornstalk? It's definitely one of the interesting aspects about the whole thing.
Yeah. There's a lot going on down there. And it does. It just feels different.
Yeah, I think it has a really
and
weird
we've been
feel.
down there too when there wasn't the festival going on. And it's
almost like going back in time too.
Yeah.
The town still very much has that like small town vibe.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Where you could be like, you could imagine it easily being, 1967 or so. And when you mentioned Men in Black, the Men in Black were famously seen down there around the time that the Mothman was seen. And you imagine how much they would stick out back then in that small town. These, kind of strange men dressed in these suits walking downtown in a city that's so small, especially in the 60s where everybody knows everybody. And it's no wonder that they stuck out and people, thought this was so strange because they were so out of place there. And, they were intimidating, like reporter Mary Heyer about, what right do you have to be reporting on this stuff? Stop reporting about this stuff. Of course, the Men in Black has connection to UFO lore, especially going back decades. Witnesses report encounters with the Men in Black showing up, telling them, intimidating them, telling them, not to discuss what they saw, to stop talking about what they saw. Men in Black's an interesting subject. And what are we dealing with the Men in Black? Some people think, these are government officers, especially
deep, dark.
Whereas things are more just out in the open and crazy now. But, say 20, 30 years ago, that the government, these are actually were these government agents going out trying to silence witnesses. But then you have some people who believe these men in black were possibly even extraterrestrial in origin, because there's those strange, the appearances were
robotic
strange.
and like they're wearing a suit almost.
I've heard like wax like skin.
Yeah.
Like there's something was strange about their skin tone, their behavior. Like the way they would interact with things just would seem off. Things they would say, the way they would talk would seem so off. So some people would believe or hypothesize, were these not even human?
Right.
So yeah.
Did not eat Jello.
Yeah, did
Was
not
that
use
one of them?
There's some really weird ones.
Forks.
Yeah.
There's
almost
heard
like
that one.
and there's almost like a lifespan on the visits of how long they could, be in interaction with a human, right? Like
They
the
had to
visits
get
were
out
never
there.
terribly long, but they'd be like they'd either want like the pictures you took or the videos you took, or they'd ask you and like you said, tell you not to talk about it. But then I think at one point they were offered Jello and they're like,
what do you do with
I had no
this?
idea how to eat it. Didn't know how to use a pen, right?
Oh yeah, the pen.
The
They didn't
pen
know what
incident.
one of them didn't know what a pen was or how to use it.
Yeah, I thought it was the
And then there's another interesting aspect about this is that I've talked about with some friends, fellow researchers. Could it be possible that this bizarre behavior was done on purpose so that when people talked about it, it would be so unbelievable?
There you go.
Like could their bizarre behavior have been bizarre intentionally so that nobody would believe the story?
Never thought about that. Totally discredits them.
I don't know. I think the chances are probably slim, but it's possible. It's possible.
Anything's possible.
Yeah,
anymore.
anything's possible.
I don't.
You talk about you guys in the strange road. That's what you talk about is
Right.
strangeness of
Right.
our world and what people encounter.
And the truth, the stories are a lot of times are stranger than fiction.
Oh yeah.
The best movies, some of the real stories that you hear are just out of this world. I mean, especially the Chris Bledsoe stuff.
Chris Bledsoe's story is pretty wild.
It does sound
Stardust
interesting. I'm not
Ranch.
familiar with
Yeah,
that.
you should check it. His son does a podcast, and they have experiences too.
Oh,
where
yeah.
He basically calls in these orbs.
Okay.
He's
Basically
able to
signal them in. Yeah.
He has like communication links with them after this experience that happened back
and
in
he
the
has
90s.
legit contacts through multiple 3 and 4 letter agencies like
They're all
across the board.
studied him. They've all
He's basically like the
studied him.
kid from you ever saw the movie The Flight of the Navigator?
I have not seen that.
Oh, you
Kid
gotta check that out.
time travels basically in this UFO. And then when he time travels, right, like NASA gets him and they just basically lock him up and study him. And I'm like, this is the reverse. They let this guy roam, but they definitely watch
They're
him
keeping
and
an
study
eye on
him.
him.
As far as I'm talking about we, the government type, because they're interested in why he is having these interactions or how he's doing it, because they would like to have the same interactions. And these entities and orbs and UFOs don't want anything to do with like NASA and the government.
Is
on
this
that
like
side.
that CE5 stuff? Like the
It's different. It's just
Way
Chris.
different, yeah.
Oh, way different.
It's
than that.
not
Okay.
anybody can do it really. It's just his
it's
way
his-
of doing it. So
okay.
he'll say, "Meet me here at this time," and then you show up. He does a prayer
Okay.
and basically like prays.
He's
and
done it for other podcasts too, and been
Danny
like, "Hey, let's go
Jones
out to the
recently.
ocean. We'll do it." He's
So
like,
he
"Well,
would bring like the lights in, stuff
Yeah.
like that.
He did it with the Danny
Yeah.
Jones podcast, who's a pretty big YouTube and podcast that's had him on. And then before they filmed the episode, they went out with him, met him at this spot by the water, and he called these things in, and they saw and filmed it all.
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
it sounds pretty intense." And he's got a whole like prediction that he's made of like
And-
when this is going to get to a certain point, and it's when the star Regulus lines up with the head of the Sphinx.
Wow.
Which
you
will
guys
happen-
Had him on this show?
No.
Yeah,
I
that'd
wish.
be amazing.
Okay.
I'd
That'd
love
be
to.
amazing.
You're just talking. Okay.
Mr.
Just
Bledsoe,
recounting
you're
some
welcome
of his
anytime.
information. Yeah.
Wow.
But some of his predictions, I guess I should say. But yeah, he says.
But he's been on some pretty big shows lately.
Yeah.
The Sean Ryan show had him on, which was, he's just in there like, what? This is incredible.
It does sound intense.
Because like
he goes
you
full
said,
fantastical. He doesn't
like
care.
you
He
were
doesn't
saying,
hold back.
He don't care.
he doesn't hold back.
He
on
talks about
Not
little
at this point anymore.
toddler-looking beings that are glowing yellow and green.
He
that
sees
are
a lot
these
of different.
little children, but they're advanced
representations.
consciousness.
That
But they
sounds
look
interesting.
like children that are glowing.
Does he know what they are? Does he hypothesize about what they are?
Those are the beings that kind of visited him early on.
The visitors or whatever. But,
yeah, because his initial experience, if you guys...
Yeah, I'll have to check it out.
Yeah,
It sounds very complex.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah, he's got a lot of
His main
episodes.
story of how this all happened on this fishing trip with his kids, this first encounter, and then from there it kind of just has developed into this whole thing. But it started off with like he was owned a construction company and it was failing, and then he was just praying to God, like, give me some kind of sign that everything's going to be okay. And then all of a sudden they were out fishing and he walked away and he didn't come back for hours. He came back. He's like, I was just gone for 20 minutes. Calm down. They're like, no, you've been gone for hours. And his son
like
went
missing
out.
time kind of thing.
His son went out looking for him too and had an experience himself. And he lost track of time as well. So after that, then it's basically it developed into this occurrences that were happening all the time. And then now he's able to bring them in, and everybody studied this guy.
An experiencer kind of
Yeah,
thing.
I'll send you a good episode, a good interview that you can hear his story.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I feel bad. Wasn't familiar with it, but there's a lot out there.
It's been going on for a
out
while,
there.
it seems like. It's probably been like 10 years
Yeah.
that this
well,
has
he wrote
happened.
a book, right? I think he wrote a book. Like
I don't
10
know his
years
whole
ago.
historical
But it's just
background.
kinda
He's got a lot of
catching
shit.
on.
But what I'm saying is,
been
this has been
catching on.
around for like a decade. But it's one of those things where, like, when they first tried to talk about it, they basically got turned into a spoof. I think Discovery did a show and, like, basically painted them out as morons and this is a hoax and this and that. And so it burnt them.
He probably didn't. He didn't perceive it that way when they were doing it, right?
They're just good-natured people.
Right.
Like, if you hear him speak, you're like, this sounds like the nicest guy in the world.
Discovery. He probably didn't know as he was doing. Was he involved with the program?
Yeah, they were doing basically like a documentary series on the family and the encounter and everything.
And then it was after when it was
Basically, the way they spun it was to make it look kind of goofy
It was a hit
and
piece.
hokey and
Discovery and especially National Geographic back in the day when like we all had cable, probably still is the case. They were notoriously skeptical on all of their kind of paranormal content.
right, because they're science based, so they think they own the airspace over the world.
Right.
Like they can say this is real or not, and that's why they don't do probably cryptid stuff.
And it burns these people, and then they're very reluctant to do that kind of thing again.
Yeah, so he's been bottled up for a little while, and he's talked about it, but he's not like the explanation he's giving now or kind of again some more of the predictions he's having. He's really opening up about because it's like the timeline's actually in place, right? So he has a time like in the future that he thinks certain events are going to happen.
And he came from a really religious background. The church, Baptist church. So they were all the church, and his family is like, these are demons. These are demons coming to get
Then
you.
he couldn't talk about it because they were demons. So
he had a lot of kind of internal pressure to not believe that this was actually happening, or if it was something evil, and demonic.
I think we've had some members of our organization in the past who we're really nice. I'm still friends online with them, although I don't attend meetings anymore. They're one of those. Their whole opinion was that it was like a whole angels and demons thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that might have something to do, like you said, with like their background. If somebody comes from a very religious background, and yeah, if you're being told by your religious parents that these are demonic. Or what you're experiencing is, evil, you probably would be reluctant to talk about it, especially to them.
Yeah.
That's another one of those things with UFOs too. Some people think UFOs, and going back to Mothman, there are some people out there who think that we're seeing angelic beings, we're seeing demonic beings. It's just one of the many kind of opinions out there on the unexplained.
No doubt. So you're you interested in the paranormal? What on the paranormal side? More ghost apparitions? You've done any, I guess, ghost hunts?
Yes, I've always been interested in the unexplained, the mysterious, my unsolved mysteries. I wore it today because it kind of really makes like really kind of represents like what I'm interested in. I consider myself a ufologist first and foremost, because I now run, our organization. UFOs have always been one of my major my major interests and topics of research. But I've also done a lot of looking into cryptids. I have a lot of friends in the Ohio Bigfoot community. Mothman, of course, UFOs, but I'm also fascinated in my kind of paranormal library at home. I think I have the most books on ghosts and than anything else. I live in a haunted house. I'm sure about that, and I've experienced haunted activity twice in my life. Well, at 2 locations: my house and the Lowe Hotel, and I've not experienced paranormal activity in any of the other places that I've been that were allegedly haunted. But the Lowe Hotel was one, and the home I live in now is the other. I actually write for a local news publication in Circleville called the Scioto Post. I did one story a few years back. I think the first one was around Halloween time. I was talking to the editor of the Scioto Post, and they're like, do you want to do an article for Halloween, something spooky? I was like, well, I can talk about the paranormal activity in my home. And, he was like, okay, yeah, that'd be great for Halloween. So I wrote a story, and like, it really took off.
Wow.
And then since I've written, I think 3 or 4 other ones for the Scioto Post, talking about the activity I've experienced in my home. That's kind of turned into authors getting a hold of me. And now the encounters and my house have been in a couple books. Because I think authors are finding my my Scioto Post articles online.
Right.
And like if you Google Scioto Post Cameron Jones or Scioto Post Ghost, Circleville Ghost, like my articles tend to come up. And so that's kind of taken off. And what's really interesting is after the first article I wrote, I remember they posted the story. They posted on their website, but they also posted on their Facebook. And I believe the article was like a haunting in Circleville. And they posted on their Facebook a link. And in the comments, a woman said, I wonder what house he lives in. And he's like, because I lived on Mound Street, and my house was notoriously haunted. And I messaged the woman and I said, I live at 149 West Mound Street. Well, she was a former owner of my home.
Wow.
Yeah. And she had no idea. Circleville's got to have thousands of homes. And this woman, she was the owner of the person that we bought it from. So, so she was like 2 owners ago. And so I started talking back with her, talking back and forth with her about what she experienced at the house. And I was just blown away. I was like, here's this woman who reads my article, and it reminds her of the house she used to live in Circleville, and it's actually the same house. And it kind of made me feel like, well, what I'm experiencing is real. I know it's real anyways, but it's, the former owner of the house also experienced strange things. Confirmation. Yeah. And Mound Street. Yeah. There's been some interesting activity. I live near the courthouse in Circleville, and I think one author did a book on the hauntings, the reported hauntings of the Pickaway County Courthouse, the Circleville Courthouse. And I can see the courthouse from my porch, and like we live on like a hill, and possibly it's where Mound Street came from. There were probably mounds in the area back in the day. And could there be some connection there? We had one gentleman have a time slip experience reported to us at my UFO group. Yeah, I think it was an episode of Missing Time. This is a while ago, Missing Time episode, and we were discussing it with him. And he was actually sitting in the alley in his car at the Catholic Church on Mound Street. And where he had his encounter was right across the street from me. It's like I'm across from a Catholic church in the courthouse. So I ran into a gentleman who had a missing time experience in Circleville, and it was like right next door to my house. So I was like, wow, maybe it's not just the house. Maybe it's this whole area. And then just talking with that author who was doing the book on the haunted courthouse of Circleville. I was like, it's like, wow. He's like, I want to use a couple of your stories from your article because I think there could be a connection here because how close you are to the courthouse. And I was like, well, it's possible.
Yeah.
And you know, it might not just be the house itself. It could be the area.
Yeah. Wasn't Circleville a giant mound? A giant earthwork? That's why it's a giant circle, and then all the homes were inside of it. Mm-hmm. In the 60s, they destroyed the earthwork and then built the town into squares like a traditional, I guess, right angle block system.
Yeah, like a grid or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was originally at Circleville. There's a, if you Google Circleville, Ohio, one of the first things that should come up was the depiction, the map of the original town. It was laid out on a circle. Mm-hmm. Like all the buildings were angled in a certain way so that, you know, like they could narrow in the front and go out because it was all literally a circle. Founded within what they call prehistoric earthworks. Now that's mounds, I believe.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. That's what we think of when we think of like the mounds of Ohio.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Not a burial mound, but more of an earthen, geometric earthwork. They do squares, octagons, circles. Like there's a giant circle in Newark, but Circleville's was huge, so big that they fit a whole town inside of it.
Yeah, and then
so
like you said,
what does that do if you tear those down? That's going to stir up some activity. You know, if that mound gets destroyed. Yeah, in the formation of the town.
I'm on like I'm not too far from the original circle. My house is right outside the original circle.
Okay,
which could be a connection there. But yeah, I lived there for about 10 years, and it started off as footsteps upstairs. I was home alone, and then it just progressed from there. I've had multiple experiences in the home. The doors open and close by themselves. The dishwasher will start by itself. The stairs are a really high activity area of the home. I'm constantly seeing beings on the stairs, but when I stop or turn around or come back, you know, they're not there. Voices, singing. I remember one time my mom was there and she had never experienced anything, and I didn't really think she really believed in any of it, but she yelled for me to come. And I went up to the upstairs bathroom, and she said, there's singing coming out of the wall. She's like, I've been in here for 10 minutes and somebody's singing, and I can't figure out where it is. It's coming from inside the wall. And that was so strange.
Wow.
But a lot of the toys, we have a lot of nieces and nephews. We have a playroom. Those toys constantly are going off on their own. Voices. I hear a lot of voices. I've never had what I would call a full body apparition. And I'm wanting that because I'm wanting to convince myself. I'm like, I know there's a real activity here, but I wish I could just see something that would be so undeniable that I would be so sure. But I'm always just seeing stuff fleeting out of the corner of my eye. But I remember one time the police showed up at the house. I'm trying to remember the exact details of this. I wrote about it in one of my articles that's available online. But the police showed up at the house, and I remember going out. They came up to the porch and opened, and they said somebody set off the panic alarm or something on your thing. I'm like, I've been here alone. I haven't touched the alarm. Like somebody sent the help alarm or whatever. Yeah. And they were saying that some signal was sent to the police from our alarm, and it was done, you know, within the last 10 minutes. And I was like, oh, I didn't do that. And I was like, well, could that have been the ghost? Whoa. Somebody messing with the alarm system? Yeah. Yeah. I keep a journal. I've kept a journal for 5 years about everything that's happened. So yeah, that's one of my other areas of interest, mainly just from living in the house. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've always been interested in the unexplained, but I really kind of dove into it after living there and experiencing a lot of strange stuff.
Just trying to find answers.
Yeah. I don't really do any ghost hunting per se. I think of living where I live as like kind of like a long research project. Yeah. And I do document everything, which is about like I'm usually experiencing something maybe 2 or 3 times a week, even if it's something small. Wow. So I do document all that.
Ouija board? Have you sat on a board and been like, hey.
Don't do it.
So yeah, I've heard so
Contact
much
me.
conflicting
Don't
stuff.
Don't do it.
I have people
was
that
just
I
curious.
know because I've always wanted to. I have an antique Ouija board.
Really?
Yeah, back from the pre-Parker Brothers days. I think it's from the early 50s or something. And I've thought about using it, but then I have people that I know who are like you, and are like, no, don't even do it. So I was like, well, I guess I won't use it.
Yeah, I've never done one, or I've never done one successfully.
It's so strange because
Every story turns
you'll
into
see 'em at Target.
we talked to
They
my
used be
dead
at Walmart.
cousin.
They would sell them, but
Yeah. It starts off with we tried to contact my dead cousin that passed away, or my sister or mother, and the next thing you know, you're hearing scratching inside the walls. You're hearing what can be nothing. In the end, it ends up being, something darker. You're opening up a portal. Like, that's all the stories that I've heard and have seen about the Ouija board. It starts off real simple,
low key,
super low key, and then it just ramps up.
yeah. So I just on the off chance that that's real, that could happen. I haven't used it in the house.
I've never used one. I'm always curious because I'm like, so it's a board game made by a
It's
company.
definitely not a board game.
And it is so weird because you hear like these things, and then I remember seeing it was so weird seeing it in like a department store, advertising like the kids. It'd be like the children's game section or something. I'm like, some people think this thing is about the most dangerous thing you can mess with, and here it is being sold.
But that's why I think it doesn't make sense. Like, I mean, be like, oh yeah, we sell nuclear bombs in aisle 7. You can have one. Like, that's just not something that you would think you'd put in the hands of everyday
somebody
people.
in the occult worked at Parker Brothers and was like, hey, this would be a good thing to get out on the market. You have a lot of secret occultists, people that are into, practicing something. Yeah.
Right. Oh yeah, I believe that.
I think I might have to test out a Ouija board.
No.
I'm going to do it
around me. Don't do it at your house.
I'm going to do it.
Tell your wife.
I'm going to do it sometime. I'm going to
I'm
try
not
it
going
out.
to be there.
Oh, I'll do it in
you've
the
had a bad
sunshine. I'm going to do it
bad
up on my top
experience,
balcony
or
in the
just-
daytime in the sunlight. I'm not getting all dark and hooded and wizardy with like candles.
I don't think it matters.
You just heard a lot of crazy stuff, so
Yeah.
you're like very anti.
Let me
Yeah.
ask you this.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. If the Ouija board is that, what's the difference between using a Ouija board and people that say they're psychics or they can contact the dead via telepathic nature?
Well, I
What's
think
the difference?
there's a trickster at the other end when you're using it that's claiming to be your
I think
dead
there's like a
sister, cousin.
Ouija
and
board operator that is the like
there's-
deceiver.
I think there's
like a
some
default-
deceivers back behind
Well, that's
whatever
what I'm saying
you're
though. But
opening up
but
something.
okay, but that's just my question then.
Yeah. I don't
The
know.
Ouija board beside itself.
Mhm.
There are still people that are contacting and doing these things, even like Chris Bledsoe. He's contacting. How does he know he's not contacting a demon then?
Well, that's what his church is worried about.
Well, again, if you put the Ouija board in
I
there,
don't
it's
know.
demonic. If you take that out, it's possibly just an extra phenomena. But that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't see the Ouija board as the problem. I think maybe people use the Ouija board
They don't
and they're
know-
able
How
to
about this?
contact things,
You
and then
don't-
they get deceived.
You don't
because-
know what you're doing. I think you got to know what you're doing to use it. And people that are just buying at a Toys R Us, they're not
Right.
trained necessarily at all on how to properly
Maybe there's
use it.
something specific about the Ouija board that does make it dangerous.
It's like
in that
anything.
way.
I'm not going to go and just start playing with tarot cards. I don't know anything about tarot cards.
But the whole trickster, you were saying, what if it's, some sort of trickster entity behind it, masquerading as, a spirit. There's a really interesting author. He's one of my favorite authors. He's based in England, Peter A. McHugh. He writes some really interesting books. One's Paranormal Encounters in Britain's Forests. Another one is about paranormal encounters on Britain's roads. You've got that one's really good, talking about phantom hitchhikers, people seeing UFOs, ghosts, and basically just documents these experiences. But his own pet theory, which I got to admit, he mentions very briefly, whereas some of these authors will kind of shove their theory down your throat in these books. He mentions it very, very, very briefly, but he thinks it's possible that all these kinds of phenomenon that we're talking about under the umbrella term paranormal is actually some sort of trickster entity. he thinks that's why that it actually could all be down to some sort of kind of trickster spirit. So not necessarily malevolent or benevolent, not necessarily good or bad, but maybe both or neither. And that it could be some sort of force or entity who enjoys confusing us.
Or maybe that's its job.
Yeah, possible. But yeah, that's another one of those theories on the paranormal. I'm like, that you come across cases where you definitely get like the distinct flavor of like something like that could be behind it. You're like, no, I could see some sort of like trickster entity being involved with this. The activity's so kind of off the wall and strange.
Well, even with like the Mothman, I know the movie and film represented it in a completely different aspect of what Keel was doing down there, but there seemed to be some trickster elements to that even, right? Of like,
oh yeah,
prophesizing to people like this was going to happen or that was going to happen. And again, I can't remember I know I've read the book, but I don't know the facts of the case or, verbatim stories. But yeah, it seemed like there was an aspect of that. Of
yeah, definitely.
Well, you're looking at it now that it knows you're looking at it. It's like we're the cat and it's dangling the yarn ball, and it's just like, yeah, get it. It's a dimensional being that's so many dimensions higher too that like we can't really perceive it. Have you ever heard that explanation of how like somebody's at the chalkboard and they're like, well, I'm going to draw this in 2D and it's a circle, but in 3D it's a sphere. Well, as you keep popping out dimensions further and further, a two-dimensional being or living organism can't really perceive what we perceive in a three-dimensional world, right? It can only see in 2D. So as we keep going with that, like, what if they're just beings that are like literally they're sitting so much higher perspectively than we are? Like they can see from a different vantage point, just like as if there was a cat here, I could see from sitting above it and like my vantage point. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, I think I totally get what you're saying, and I think that's definitely possible. You were talking about there's something I was going to say. You were mentioning about perceiving things, like they're like with the Mothman and like what Keel. Now I remember where I was going. The John Keel books. I mean, you read his books, especially of his investigations in Point Pleasant and around. You definitely kind of get that kind of feeling, like I could totally see where it's almost like somebody was like something or somebody was like playing these sort of really bizarre games.
Yes.
With the town, certain people.
Yeah.
And it was like something would happen over here and you'd look over there, but then something else would start somewhere else. And there's so many bizarre aspects. And I feel like Keel himself was going down that road and he was very interested in it all. And
he was immersed into the whole world as it was unfolding too.
Yeah. And I especially appreciate Keel because he didn't really subscribe or push any sort of one theory for it on you. He was just kind of like, I don't know. I just really always appreciated the way he talked in the books, in the Mothman Prophecy book, about what was happening, and I just thought he presented it in a really unbiased way, and he didn't try to make it fit any certain theory. I always felt like, but Keel totally he went down a rabbit hole down there for sure.
Oh yeah, long ride. And again, even I remember from reading the book and watching the film, that's why I was like, they don't mention the UFO flap, they don't talk about the Men in Black. The only thing they did in the film was the Mothman itself. And again, it's the whole theory of like, okay, you lost me after UFO and you started talking about aliens being inside it, right? Like most people are like, okay, the Mothman, that archetype, I can take that enough in a film to consume it. But if you went and saw the Mothman, the movie, as based on the John Keel book, you would leave going, what the hell happened?
Yeah.
How much? What? It would be too much. It seems like too much. Like he was talking about just going out and like flashing his headlights or like a flashlight to it, like these UFOs, and they would flash back to him. Like he was having interactions with things while all of this was going on. Like he had a lot of heat on him. Like phones and people impersonating him and people getting calls from him where he was like, no, that wasn't me. That's the kind of stuff they wove into the Mothman between him and the other character that's having the contact with Injured Cold is like, you know, I mean, even John or Richard Gere in the film, he's getting a call from his wife, and the one character's like, whoever that is on the other end of the line, it's not your wife.
Yeah.
It's not going to be her. You know, it's this trick. So that's very interesting. You say maybe it's a trickster. It's, I don't know.
It's like the phenomenon itself is conscious. You know what I mean? Like whatever's controlling, there's like a puppet master consciousness. And that's what, like out at Skinwalker Ranch, it seems to, every time they do a test out there, and this goes back to even the Bigelow days, that this, whatever it is, the phenomenon itself is always one step ahead of it.
There's definitely a consciousness there, or still is there. Like you said in the original book, long before the show, the original book, Hunt for the Skinwalker.
Yep.
Oh my God, that book just like fascinated me. I've reread it a few times over the years. But yeah, they would talk about the original NIDS investigation of the area. They would talk about, you know, having some sort of activity over on this part of the ranch. So they would set up all of this really expensive equipment focusing on that part of the ranch because there was something so strange there's so much activity there, it's hard to even remember. But
it was like a carnival was going on.
It's like there would be some strange lights or manifestations seen on the certain parts. They would set up all this equipment in there, and then the next night, of course, it would happen on the other side. It was like there was definitely like it was consciously aware of this group's efforts to document it, and either whether it didn't want to be documented or just for fun, it would mess with them like that
all the time.
What do you think about a couple of the instances that were very interesting to me? Was one where the bulls were all shoved into the trailer.
That was in
and
the
they
book.
were like, how?
That was so strange.
And that's just because the physics of it and the geometry and the mathematics. And then the other one was, I think they had lost like a post hole digger and they found it up in a tree, like 40 or 50 feet up in this tree. And they're like again, like this thing was sitting next to the side of the barn.
Yeah.
How in the fuck did it get up there? It's
not like it was a light in the sky that might have been a plane from the local airport. You know, it's not like there's
there was something going on.
Reasonable, easy explanation for that.
When they talked about portal activity of things coming through, basically portals opening up, that when you would wear these infrared goggles at night or whatever the vision spectrum was going on, there's a scene in that book where the two guys on the team are sitting there going, and the one guy's got the goggles and the other guy doesn't. The guy's like, holy shit, oh my God. The guy's like, let me see. And he's like, what? And he pops him on. There's this portal that opens up and this like creature that crawls out of it.
There's a creature that was coming out of it. Right. Yeah, I remember that.
Like that's free. Okay, so if we just don't have the right spectrum of vision, these things could be happening all around us.
Yeah.
I don't think down here in Columbus maybe necessarily, you know. I think they pick and choose their times.
Right.
Or maybe, again, there's a better locale where it's easier to do it, or there's, you know, okay, just portal theory in general, right? Like you've watched the X-Men films with, say, the Nightcrawler, right? Like, hey, if you want to go from here to there, you got to know where you're going. Otherwise, you might do the whole Philadelphia experiment and materialize midway through the ship.
Right.
And that's no good for anybody. So with these portal transports in something like Skinwalker Ranch or places like that, maybe that's a designated area. Like that's just where these things that have that ability know to do it. Because again, I don't think it's going to happen down here. I think they'd be like, well, if I just popped in the middle of a downtown high rise, maybe they know out in the middle of the West, that landscape's pretty much unchanged for what, millennia? Like, I mean, maybe the dust blows a little bit but
yeah, these areas could be picked for, they could be chosen for sure.
I think it's something that's been there for thousands of years. Something's inside the mesa and under the ground. I think it's been there for a long time. And all the other phenomenon that's going on around it is because of what's in the mesa.
Oh, yeah.
I think.
Oh, it's definitely possible. Definitely possible. I think there's a reason why that show and the Skinwalker Ranch and the book, and then there's even a follow up to the book with Skinwalkers at the Pentagon.
I have that one on Audible as well.
Yeah, so I think there's a reason why so many people are just captured by that. Why the show is so interesting to watch and garners so many viewers is that it's just so much wild stuff going on there, and there's just no easy answers. No, and everybody loves a mystery. And I'm always fascinated by mysteries, and Skinwalker Ranch comes up a lot in our discussions at RUFOS for sure. Like if a case, I mean, as certain strange aspects of a case, or multiple phenomenon at once. We'll be like, oh, that's kind of aspects of Skinwalker Ranch there, like high strangeness, the Oz, the Oz factor. Linda Moulton Howe coined that term, I believe, the Oz factor. Like,
she's awesome.
Yeah, like we know,
She's
like fantastic. we're not in Kansas anymore, So yeah, Skinwalker Ranch is very interesting, and I think there's a lot of places like that we've discussed in others, Bridgewater Triangle. There's another place. Speaking of multiple areas that have kind of strange things reported, multiple phenomenon. Researcher Stan Gordon, based in Pennsilvania, the Kexburg area.
Yeah, I really want to get over there.
Yeah, he talks about one of Stan Gordon's books. Well, he's written many books on the strangeness of that whole area. I've done a lot of research into the Kexburg crash, the Kexburg UFO crash, and that was on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was. Yeah. Kexburg was definitely an Unsolved Mysteries episode. But it wasn't just that. Author Stan Gordon, and talks about all kinds of activity out there. I think the guys, I think Seth Breedlove, I was a producer on a couple of his early documentaries. I think he did one not too long ago. Well, a while back, on strange activity in that area. I forget what that one's called, but yeah, starting with the Kexburg crash in the 60s, and it continues to this day. There's a lot of Bigfoot activity in that area of Pennsylvania. UFO activity. So there's another one kind of in the Midwest, not too far from Ohio, where you've got an area that could be maybe there's some sort of portal there, some sort of portal activity there. That's why we're possibly seeing people report so many strange things there.
Yeah, that's one of the spots I want to get to. Is I want to take a day trip or even do a weekend and go to Kexburg and just go find the spot where it happened or close enough or whatever approximation, and just see if there's still any kind of like residual like vibes from that.
Yeah, kind of like how Point Pleasant is. And, you feel that weird vibe, just kind of going and like exploring the area and seeing like like what kind of vibes the area gives you. I think Kexburg even does a little festival now.
Oh, really?
I think it's still small and able to be easily enjoyed.
They should be doing one.
Yeah.
Jeez, they've got a great encounter.
Yeah, I think it's been going on for a few years.
That's amazing.
But yeah, they have a little gathering there. And you can go any time of the year and see. They have a large reproduction of the craft there.
Oh, cool!
It's up on
of the acorn.
Of the acorn-like craft.
Yeah,
I think that's there for people who want
to
go
see
there,
it. Man.
Yeah, it's right down the road. It's not that far away.
I've never been to Kexburg either, and I've always meant to.
I went to the Mothman Museum. I've been to Roswell. I've been to the impact crater out west.
I want to go to Kexburg as well. I've always meant to go. I think one year the Kexburg, I was like, well, I'll just go during the festival. I'll probably know a few people there. Stan Gordon will be there, and he knows, he's a great guy to talk to. And I was like, yeah. And then it was the weekend of another kind of, I don't remember if it was the Ohio Bigfoot conference that I usually attend, I think it might have been the same weekend as that, but there was another sort of paranormal event that weekend, so I wasn't able to go. But I do want to get down there for sure.
Yeah.
So,
It'd be a fun trip. I would like to do some camping out there and just like get into it. Like just
pretty
hang out in the
remote.
woods.
Yeah.
Put some audio recorders out there.
People don't realize how wooded Pennsylvania is. Like
Oh,
the
there's a
Laurel
lot of trees
Highlands,
out there.
the Laurel Highlands, Pennsylvania. It's just a beautiful. It looks like the Swiss foothills.
Yeah, I mean,
know,
driving through there and you see so much like open like wilderness. Like,
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
I'm like,
tons.
like, you could drive through there and you just realize how remote and like build up a lot of the areas. Yeah,
Totally.
for hours and hours. Pennsylvania is long to drive through.
It's
Like if you're going the
very
whole,
long. Yeah.
you're like, how could I still be in Pennsylvania?
We've
It's
done
like
it.
going through Oklahoma.
We've done it.
Oh, I haven't done that, but I bet.
Oklahoma's
Similar.
longer.
It's,
Is it? It just
I
goes
drove
on
the whole
forever?
state and forgot about it.
Nebraska.
That's how boring it was.
That's how boring it was.
Yeah.
This.
We've driven through Oklahoma a bunch.
Yeah, I've driven across country multiple times. I've never known about Skinwalker Ranch and that stuff while I was doing it, or had the inclination to be like, you know what, I'm just going to drive out that way.
Right.
But
The road going through it used to be open, but it's not open anymore, right? Something
I
like that.
don't know about that. Now here's another question. Okay, so same kind of application of I have a UFO experience. I don't talk about it. You have a
Gotcha.
UFO experience. You don't talk about it. He has one. He talks about it.
Gotcha.
1 out of 3. One Skinwalker Ranch. Maybe you got one. Maybe you got one. How many Skinwalker Ranches are there possibly then? How many places like that where people are like, I don't need anybody knowing that I got this weird
I
stuff
think
going
there's
on.
at least 10.
Kind of like Outer Range, you know, with the hole in the ground. And
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I was so bummed that show got canceled.
It got
canceled?
Outer Range got canceled after 2 seasons.
No.
Yes.
What?
And I loved
That was
it.
a great show,
I was
man.
talking about it yesterday. Yep, they announced.
Oh,
its
he just started watching it.
Oh, I
too.
just
They announced
finished
its
it.
cancellation just a couple weeks ago, and I was so bummed because we didn't get all the answers yet. Okay, I'm so glad you guys watched that because
Oh, Outer
how
Range is
fascinating was that show?
ate
It's
that show up.
You had
different-
time travel,
The
you had
portal,
all
black hole.
Yes, like and oh my god, that I love Outer Range. I thought it was
Great.
such a clever show.
I thought it was amazing.
I'm a big
Yes.
fan of
Brolin.
Brolin. Josh Brolin.
Josh Brolin's
anyways.
does
I
some
love
good-
that dude.
He does some good pieces. He played a
Yep.
perfect part in that film.
He was
that
great.
series.
Oh man, it was so good. Yeah, I was got an email from Entertainment Weekly, and it was like shows we hate to see to go that were canceled for 2025, and it was Outer Range got canceled after 2 seasons.
You know why? Because it's too good.
Yeah,
It makes
was.
people think too much. It makes people
Probably.
question reality too much. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe it was just like it was too like ambiguous. Maybe not enough people. More people wanted to be like spoon fed something more simple. But I loved how just kind of up in the air the show was, and how it kind of left so much open to interpretation.
Yep.
But I was kind of hoping that we would get to see more, and I was looking forward to a new season because felt like I waited a while to get season 2, but. Sorry to give you that news because I was bummed about it.
That sucks. Yeah.
I was like,
Well,
this is one of the best shows that's come out in a while.
in a long
so
time,
good.
right? Like I
Great
felt
acting.
very excited every time to watch every new episode
Yeah.
because again they would keep twisting it on you of like, oh, what? Like the first just his revelation alone, and I'm not going to ruin it for anybody else, but just like when he finally spills his secret, right?
Yeah,
Josh
yeah.
Brolin. I don't
Yeah.
want to tell people that haven't seen what the
Oh,
secret
yeah.
is, but
Yeah.
the first time
In the
you
second
realize what his
season.
secret is, you're
Yeah.
like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay,
Then you're like,
this
now
got
I know.
strange.
Now I know who the blonde girl is.
Yeah.
Well,
The mysterious.
I didn't.
Yeah.
I was
No.
still leaving it. I was like, no, I don't like to think that far ahead.
But yeah.
just by nature.
It was
I do.
interesting. That kind of goes very well, like along with what we've been talking about your podcast. Like it's somebody who's got this, insane hole in the, and their property. So yeah.
But how many people don't talk about it?
How many places could there be out there that are like that, or like Skinwalker Ranch, or where people do
Serpent
not
Mound
talk
Crater
about
is
it?
one of them in Ohio, I think.
Serpent Mound, yeah.
The crater area, the whole area, I think, is Blind Frog Ranch, Stardust Ranch, Bridgewater Triangle, Bradshaw Ranch, Skinwalker Ranch. Right there's 5.
There's probably
and
so many.
there's more that
Probably more,
I
for
can't
sure.
think of. There's at least 10 that are very well known at this point. Whether you've got cryptids, you've got paranormal, you've got ET craft, you've got orbs, you've got beings like that Stardust Ranch where the beings were popping up into existence in his house. Just like all of a sudden they'd be there, and he hacked one with a samurai sword.
Wow.
That's a wild story.
Yeah.
Stardust Ranch is weird. They're all weird. None of it sounds. It sounds like a video game.
He was being tormented.
Sounds like a video game that's like glitching out and doing weird things, and you're like, wait, this isn't normal.
Yeah, our buddy Jeff Ferran from Strangeology. I don't know if you're hip to that YouTube channel, but he does all kinds of cool videos. But he told the story about Stardust Ranch on our show, and I'd never heard of it.
Right.
And then I went and looked up everything I possibly could about it, and there's not that much information about some of these places. Bradshaw
I'm saying,
Ranch,
out
most
there.
people
Yeah.
aren't going to talk about it. Most
Yeah.
people probably will never say it happened.
yeah,
They just
you're right.
keep it quiet.
I think there could have been some strange stuff, possibly still strange stuff going on out in the Pine Barrens in New Jersey.
oh no doubt,
Yeah.
no doubt.
What do
That's
you
a
mean?
strange, weird
Like,
area.
where the whole
Jersey
the
Devil.
Jersey Devil legend comes from, and
Yeah.
that wilderness kind of area, Pine Barrens
There's
area.
a lot there.
yeah.
UFO reports,
Mhm.
cryptids. Yeah,
Strange stuff seen there. Along with where the whole Jersey Devil legend comes from, that whole area. There's a lot of other stuff seen, and I think it could be possibly one of those areas where you've got a lot of stuff happening.
man, Cameron, we went the distance on this guy.
For sure.
Before we let you go and sign off, is there anything else that you want to tell us about? Any more research? Where we can find you?
Sure.
Send us off with some words of wisdom.
I definitely wanted to give another mention for our group, Round Town UFO Society. We are now the oldest UFO society in the Midwest, at least. Possibly even a bigger area than that, but we've been around since 1989. We meet once a month. It was a Circleville library, but now it's actually moved to the American Legion because of our director, Pete, is part of the Legion, and he knows so many people there. So we meet at the Legion second Thursday of the month. A lot of people think, because I've been told, they hear the term society, they think, oh, there's some sort of secret society or you have to be invited or a member. But no, our meetings are always open to the public. We have an account on Twitter/X that I run. We have an account on Facebook that's run by webmaster Michael Moore. It's not updated quite as much as the Twitter, but yeah, you can find us at roundtownufosociety.com, on X, on Facebook. And if you'd like to attend one of our meetings, that would be great. Especially if you have an encounter. So if you have an encounter, we love having people come and talk about their stories if they're open to doing that. We definitely always allow people to talk about what they've seen. We usually have at least a few guests every month. So that's fun. But yeah, I'm most active now on Blue Sky, Cameron Jones. I also have a Facebook account where I, other than my day-to-day life, I talk about a lot of my research into 4DN topics, including UFOs, of course. You can find me on Blue Sky and Facebook. And I guess that's it. But I love coming and talking about all this stuff. This has been one of the funnest podcast experiences I've had. I liked how we were just able to go naturally and discuss whatever came up, because I know, like myself, you guys are interested in more than just one specific topic.
Yeah.
You're interested in the mysterious, the strangeness in general. This, like I said, the strangeness of our world.
Yeah.
And that's just always interesting to dive into.
Yeah, we've tried to. You can get a lot further quicker, I think, if you go niche with what we're doing, podcasts, paranormal. If you're doing ghosts, you're doing Bigfoot, you're doing cryptid. we just like to talk about everything.
Yeah, it's been nice.
I like to leave it open to, we want to talk about ancient civilizations or UFOs, or we talk a lot of UFOs just with all the stuff in the news in the last couple of years. So we do a show called Strange Happenings. It'd be awesome to have you as a guest host come on and do a Strange Happenings episode where we talk about all things strange in the news. So we'd love to have you back.
Anytime. I'd be happy to come back anytime. This has been a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
There you go, guys. Cameron Jones, everybody. Cameron, thank you so much, man. We really appreciate you.
Oh, no, thanks for having me.
And we appreciate each and every one of you guys out there for listening and watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. You can follow us on X, Instagram, TikTok. We're all over the place. I'm Mikey. This is Bub. We got Stoner and Master Control. Love, peace, and chicken grease. We're out. Yo. The super wide. There it is.